So here I have a couple of surfaces that I'm going to prepare today. I have some 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter tiles. These are 4 inch by 4 inch. I've got a couple of 12 inch vinyl records. I've got one here that I will be taping up, and this one is one that I've already done. And I've also got an 8 inch by 8 inch canvas. I'll start off with the tiles because they're the smallest and easiest to do. And I'll just get some of this out of the way. Now, before we start preparing everything, the only things that you'll need are some painter's tape. This is blue Scotch painter's tape, and I like using this because it has a paint block technology built into the glue underneath, which prevents any paint from seeping underneath, and if it does, it will repel it out on the sides. The other thing you'll need is a nice brand new sharp long bladed craft knife, just like this. This will help get nice clean cuts on our tape. So to begin with, I like to do all of my tiles all at once. And the way I do that is I lay them out. And I used to do these individually until someone else shared this trick in one of the groups that I'm in, and it's absolutely changed the way that I do this now. It's so much quicker. So you want to line these up as best you can. Get them nice and straight. Then you're going to take your painter's tape and cut tape straight across the top of all 4 of these coasters. And you can leave a little bit of overhang on one side if you need to, because you can cut that off at the end. Now you want to make sure that's nice and stuck down, and with your craft knife, put a little bit of tension on your tape, just like so, and use your craft knife to very gently cut down the edge here. The first one's always the most difficult, but the second strip goes much better. So take your tape again, try and line up that nice clean straight edge that you've got with the edge of this tile here. Push that down. Now you've actually got something to rest your knife against here, and put a little bit of tension and just glide the knife along the edge, and you've got a nice clean straight cut. Now when you come to the join, you want to make sure that these next tiles are all lined up nicely here. Take your tape, line it up on one end, and press it down nice and flat in the middle there so that they're all stuck together. Again, a little bit of tension on the edge here and a nice clean cut. Now the reason you need a nice clean fresh blade is because if you're trying to use a dull blade, you'll get jagged tears in your tape. And that's not what we want. So again, making sure everything's nice and aligned. Take your tape, and I'm using 48mm tape, which is about 2 inches, because that covers the most surface area here, and I'm only overlapping slightly so that I don't get too thin of an edge here between the joins, otherwise the tape will tear when you cut it, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So again, just work your way down. Now my tiles are actually 97mm, they're not a true 10 centimeter tile. I grabbed a couple of different ones this time, which means that I will have to cut down some of my cork backings, as my cork backings are exactly 10 centimeters, they're perfect. And this time I just grabbed a different brand of tile, and they're not exactly the same. So these ones actually have a lip around the edges, and it's basically to help the grout stick when they're actually used on walls. But who uses tiles for their intended purpose these days? I do not. Okay, and that's them done. 12 tiles all taped up. Now run your fingers along the edges, and if you have tiles that are flat around the outside, take a paddle pop stick, a popsicle stick, or something flat. I use these stir sticks for my paintings, and run that along the edge. That's called burnishing. And when you do that, you're pushing all of the tape flat against the surface so that it's nice and stuck down. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see that I'm putting the creases of these, putting pressure on the creases of these so that they're nice and adhered. Then I'm just going to take this, rub it over the surface, and you can see the pattern coming through of the tiles underneath. That's how you know it's nice and stuck down. Now the easiest way to do this is take one side of your tiles, lift them up slightly, put a little bit of pressure on the gap, find the gap, and just slide your knife straight down the gap there. It'll slide into the gap of the tiles and we'll cut that off nicely, nice and neat. Do that again, find the gap, slide it straight down. Done. And this one. Finished. So that's those cut that way. Again, repeat the process lengthways for each individual tile. Now I like to keep them in this formation for a minute. Just go back along all of the edges that you've cut. Just stick them back down with your finger in case the knife has lifted them up. Just to make sure they're nice and stuck down and no paint's going to get under there. And there you have it. In a matter of minutes, we've just taped up 12 tiles ready to paint on. Make a lovely set of coasters out of. Done, nice and easy. Okay, next thing we're going to tape up is our 8x8 inch canvas. Now these we do in a similar fashion, very easily. Take your tape, line it up with the edge, press it down, and for this I actually like to use a pair of scissors. It's much easier. And you want to fold the edge of your tape up and back slightly so that it's coming off the edge. Take your scissors and cut a nice straight flat line across like that. Rotate 90 degrees, tape out again. Now once you've lined up this edge, you don't have to line it up with the end back here because there's already tape there. So you can save a little bit of tape by rolling it up, and you only have to overlap a couple of millimeters. Again, work your way around. And I'm just loosely adhering it at this point because we're going to burnish that as well. And again, last one. Okay, now take your finger or your burnishing tool, your stir stick, and put a good amount of pressure on there so that that glue forms that seal, and try and make sure all of the cracks and imperfections in the surface, they're all covered. There we go. And the last thing that I like to do is take my craft knife or my scissors and just cut along the diagonals here of my tape. Doesn't have to be neat or perfect, and fold them under. And that's going to mean when I pick up my canvas to use, I've got something to grip here, and that's not going to get dirty and painted underneath. Now, before I paint, you want to make sure that your canvas is stretched drum tight. That means that you can do this and it makes a really nice hollow drum sound. If your canvas is not tight and it came with these are called canvas keys. And what you do with these is flip your canvas over, and you'll notice that it has holes on the sides here. You put your canvas keys with the diagonal facing out from the opposite edge, and one will have to go on the bottom and one will go on top. And you hammer these in place, and what that does is it expands the frame to tighten the canvas. The other way you can tighten the canvas, if that doesn't do much or enough, is grab a little atomizing sprayer. An atomizing sprayer looks something like this. This is just some 99% alcohol that I have in the spray bottle. And give that a good mist on the back. You can use a hairspray bottle, or you can just wet your hand and make sure that whole back surface is wet. Allow that to dry, and the canvas will absorb the water and it will tighten up. You may need to do that a couple of times. If your canvas is still loose, or if it's a larger canvas, especially anything bigger than 12 inches, what I like to do is cut up an old moving box that's got some thick, sturdy cardboard cut it to the exact dimensions of the inside of the canvas, push it down, just use a bit of tape rolled into a loop. You may need a fair few of these, and attach that to the back, and then attach the cardboard to the side here. What that will do is act as a bit of support here, and when I'm painting or putting resin on, I'll put tiles or cups or something just to lift it off the surface, just to put a little bit of pressure on the back here so that this surface is flush on the top when I pour. Usually when I'm pouring, I like to keep all my tiles and canvases lifted off the bench with these disposable plastic bowls. I get these from cheap shops here in Australia. It's just the Fun Time brand. You can literally find them anywhere. These are great because they've got a nice sturdy base and they're always level. So I can put a tile on there and then I can pick up the tile and move it around without actually having to touch it, which means I'm not going to ruin my design and I'm not going to get fingerprints everywhere. The best part about these is when it comes to resin, I resin on these as well, and once the resin's nice and hard, I can literally just pluck it out because it doesn't stick to these. So there you go. It's some dried up resin there a couple of days ago, and they're good to go for the next round. So I've used these same bowls maybe 20 or 30 times in the last couple of months, and they're still good to go. I have thrown out a couple because I've ripped them, but I've got a fresh supply. Now the last thing I'm going to show how to do is how to tape up the back of your records nice and neat so that when we flip them over, once we're done painting and resining, they'll have a nice neat edge ring just like this, and you can still see the label of what the record once was. So the way I do this is I take some baking paper, the same size as the record, just like this. Now there are a couple of ways that you can cut this out. I kept a 6-litre tub of paint, and the lid and the base of the tin happen to be the perfect size for a cutout for the back of these records. So all I do with these is take the record off, and I've got myself a cutting mat. You can cut on the back of the records, but do note that you will get knife marks on the back of the record. Take your craft knife, I place down the lid of the tin, and you can do this with anything that's circular as long as you have two different sizes. One needs to be slightly bigger than the other, and you'll see why in a second, and that'll give you a nice round polished look at the end. Okay, doesn't have to be perfect, and the good thing about this is you can actually save the rounds once you're done pouring and take them up and reuse them for the next one, which is something I like to do as well. Once you have your round cut out, take your record, and I like to clean these down with a bit of my isopropyl alcohol before I begin. The reason I do this is because heaven knows how long these records have been sitting around in the Salvation Army bin where I find them. Some of these are incredibly old, so give them a good wipe to get rid of any oil or dust or any residue that may be on them. And I like to get these from the Salvation Army because they usually just sit there, and it's usually records that no one's ever going to buy. So giving them a second lease on life and turning them into clocks is a great way to reuse them. So first thing I like to do is pick which side looks the best. That is going to be the back of your record. So in this case, both are pretty much the same, but this one has a little bit less damage here, so this is going to be my record back. Now I take a small square of tape, just big enough to cover the hole, and that is going to go on the front. That's going to stop any paint from seeping down into the baking paper at the back. I'm actually just going to cut the square a little bit bigger. Here we go. And because we're putting a clock mechanism in this, you won't notice this at all. It will be hidden. Now on the back, flip it over. We're going to take our square of paper, and we're just going to I'm going to rip this in half because this tape is quite thick, and put tape at one side of your record. Then on the exact opposite side, I'm going to tape down as well, and that's just going to hold it in place while we do the rest of our taping. So again, take our tape, rip it in half because it is a bit wide. Usually I use 36mm tape, which is more suited to this. It's much less wastage, but this will do for now. That's it, and you want to try and keep it centered as much as possible so that when we cut out the tape, we end up with a nice round ring all the way around. So just work your way around this. It does not matter if your baking paper is wrinkled or anything, it makes no difference. And there we go. So once that's all taped up, the reason you need a second round object that's slightly larger than the first is because we're going to use that to then cut out around our tape. And that's going to give us the nice clean ring when we remove it. So try and line it up with the edges of the rings of the record rather than trying to find the center because it's nearly impossible. Take your craft knife again and run it around the outside of your object. Keep the blade in contact with the surface of the record at all times. Nice and quick. Put nice even downwards pressure on the top of whatever you're cutting out. In this case, my paint tin. Set that aside. Now, because of the way that we laid the tape down, one on top of each other as we go around, we should be able to start from one end and just pull up the tape from all sides. I've missed a couple of little bits here. That's perfectly fine. Just scrape it off with a nail or with the knife. And around we go. Okay, so these little bits I mustn't have cut through hard enough. So again, very important to have a nice sharp knife when you do this so that you get a nice clean cut from the point. And again, doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, it's just going to give you that nice clean ring around the outside. And there we go. That's nice and taped up, ready for us to go when we go to pour. Now, when you do your painting or your resining, I like to paint under here as well. Just when I'm pouring, I'll grab my fingers, run some paint around the underside, and the same when I resin. The reason I do that is so that once the resin is on and it's curled around the back, it's less likely to peel off the surface if anything does happen and that resin does want to peel up. Now with your tiles, before you pour, assess how dirty they are from the box. Some tiles come incredibly dirty and may need a wipe down with that 99% isopropyl alcohol and a paper towel. If so, just give them a quick spritz, wipe them over, and they'll be good to pour on. Otherwise, I just pour straight on top. The tiles that I use are just white, glossy, glazed tiles. They're pretty cheap, very common here. You can get them almost anywhere around the world. Now, as I said before, my tiles are slightly smaller than normal. So the cork backings that I have will need to be cut. And to do that, you can do it two ways. The first way is to line up your tile with the surface that you're working on and use a pair of scissors to just cut the cork to size. Very easily, using the side of the tile as a guide. And that one's now perfect, ready to go. The other way you can do it is to lay your tile exactly the same, line up the edges here, and use your nice sharp Stanley knife to cut through. Make sure you're cutting all the way through. And again, make sure the knife is sharp so that your cork doesn't crumble. And there you go, nice and square, ready to use, and that's the perfect fit for the back of these tiles. All right, everyone, so that's how you prepare your tiles, records, and canvases before you pour. The benefit to doing this is that you don't have to do anything once they're done other than remove the tape, and any paint, any resin that's stuck to it will come with it. If you decide not to prepare your tiles in this way, there are a couple of processes you may need to do. For canvases, if you don't tape the back, the resin drips can be a pain. So you'll have to monitor them closely and scrape them off with your tool while you are pouring your resin so that it doesn't pool and drip at the bottom. And I'll show you what happens if you don't do that. You end up with these jagged lumps and bumps here, and you either have to sand them down, in which case you might sand away some of the canvas like I have done here in the paint. And taping them up is just so much easier because you just peel it straight off and the paint and the resin comes with it. Likewise for tiles, if you tape them up, you can slide your sharp bladed knife right around the edge under the tape, and anything that's stuck to that, resin, paint, will come straight off with it. You'll end up with a nice, clean, sharp edge. And I'll show you the difference between one that I've taped and one that I haven't. So this one I did not tape, and you can see it's very messy on the back. Not very clean at all. I had to sand this down after I'd done the resin process, and you have to sand it down so that your cork sticks nice and flat all the way around. Whereas this one did have the tape on the back, and you can see there's no paint whatsoever. It's got a nice, clean, flush edge, and that's far more easy to stick the cork on, and it looks a little bit more professional, especially if the edges are visible if your cork is slightly smaller than your tile. Now this applies to all sized tiles and canvases. This is a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter trivet, done exactly the same way, taped up with that masking tape, burnished the edge, and it's nice, clean, flush, ready to go for sale. So there's that one. That's the 30 centimeter tile trivet. Just got to put the cork on that, and that's ready to go out the door. With records and clocks, I don't attach anything to the back. I take my drill with a drill bit that's slightly larger than this hole. I think it's a 3 or 4 millimeter drill bit that I need, and that will go straight through the paint, straight through the resin. Do this very carefully and use something underneath. I use a bit of styrofoam just to hold up the record and catch the drill bit as it goes through. Otherwise you can crack the resin and tear the paint. And you want to drill that just big enough for your clock mechanism to fit through. If your clock mechanism is slightly smaller, just drill as much as you need through the back of this record. If you're not using it for a clock or anything like that, feel free to do whatever you need to with the back. For a placemat, this would be perfectly fine, straight on the table. The resin and the vinyl isn't going to scratch your table. So records are great because they're very lightweight, very easy to use. You can clean them, wipe them down, and they're good to go. If you wanted to hang these as functional pieces, you can do that. Just use 3M hooks or something like that that would adhere to the plastic, and they'll hang straight up on the wall. You can also choose to drill a hole through the record if you need to, hang it by a piece of string, anything like that. All right, hopefully you've learnt something from this video. Hopefully you understand now the importance of preparing your work before you begin, getting that canvas nice and tight, especially working on larger canvases, as that can make a big difference as to whether your design holds in the middle or whether it all flies off the edge or pulls, all that sort of thing. And getting a nice clean edge is really important, especially if you're going to sell your work. Some people don't mind having a messy back as it shows that it's a handmade piece. I personally like to have a nice clean back because it shows that you take some care with your work and that you are thinking ahead and you're preparing everything, making sure that it's nice and presentable. All right, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends, especially anyone that's into art, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks guys.